Hi, I am Dell with Healing Frequencies Music, and this is a little mini tutorial, I guess you could call it, on the Frequencies of Creation Part 1, which I will link to the blog post that this video matches in the description below. I'm not going to go over all of the details, just hit some key points because I understand that, I'm a teacher. If people see something written and then they hear it, somehow the hearing and the reading connect another level of understanding. So I'm going to hit the key points of that particular article, The Frequencies of Creation Part 1, in this video because I have to play some things on the piano. As you can see, I'm sitting at my beautiful baby grand. And in the introduction of the article, and I'm looking at a cheat sheet so I stay on point, there's a Science of Sound video put out by the World Science Festival in 2014. I'll put a link to that in the blog post, not below here, because I want you to go read the blog post. So go to the blog post to get the link to that video. In that sound, a scientist named Mark Whittle talks about the sound that came out of the beginning of the universe at the very beginning of time, and they know it's there because they can measure it. And he went through all the measurements, showed how he did it in the video, and then played it. And I'm like, okay, but it doesn't tell you what the note is. So me being a musician, I just figured it out. Anyway, and I'm like, didn't know what to do with the information, so it sat on a shelf until I had more definition of what it meant. 6 or 7 years down the road, because it was 2015, I think, when I first saw the video. It hadn't been out long. So what happened then is, I want to make sure that the sound is working on this. Yeah, it is. Sorry, I'm using my Blue Yeti over here. Anyway, so I wanted to make sure that I had accurate information. Then I was on a quest to also discover the musical frequencies of the Hebrew letters. And that took a very long time to figure that out because I had expectations. Now, all the things that I'm talking about, I'm going to address at the very end of the blog post in my parameters for research because I broke all the rules. We have to break the rules sometimes to figure out what the rules really are so that we are clueful and we know what we're doing. And sometimes making mistakes isn't a bad thing because if you learn from your mistakes, you're like, I'm not going to do that again. So anyway, the main thing that I thought was interesting in the video is I understand the musical harmonic series, and the sounds coming out of creation don't match the natural harmonic series. In the lesson 2 of this, I put up a couple of videos for people to explain it quite well, but I'm going to do a little tiny bit of explaining now. The harmonic series, basically, you have a fundamental frequency. We'll take this F way down at the bottom end of the keyboard. That is considered partial 1. That's your fundamental frequency, what you hear. Then what you're going to do from there, actually, I think I'm going to change it and go with what's in the blog post. Let's use this low C. I like low notes, and this piano bodaciously plays low notes nicely. So partial 1 is going to be the note that you're hearing, but it's flavored, spiced up with all these other notes. So if you hear me, I'm just going to lightly hold this note. Actually, I'm going to come up an octave because you're going to be able to hear it better. I'm going to hold this key down, which is an octave higher than this low C here. And what it's doing is it's moving the damper away from the string on the piano, which you're going to hear that sound ringing. Hopefully, I'll try to be quiet. You should be able to hear. So that synthetic vibration of that note is actually heard in this C. So there's your first partial, is that C. Then the next one, you go 5 notes higher, which is a G. So I'm going to hold this down. Again, keeping the damper off the string, I'm going to play this low C. You can hear the G, it's just weaker. The C is really strong. Let you hear the C again. It's almost as loud as the fundamental frequency. But as you get higher, the strength of those notes is weaker. So let me press the G again while I still play this low C. Listen again to the G. It's not as loud and it fades away quicker. Now, then the next harmonic, that's partial 3. Partial 4 is going to be a C 2 octaves above the lower C that I'm playing. I'm going to, again, press this key, hold it down. The damper comes up so the string is vibrating freely, and I'm going to do this. And you can hear that note. So I'm going to press it again. Listen. Okay. Now the next interval that comes out of that is, I believe, partial 5, which is a major third or a third higher. So these are the first 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 is this E here. So those are the first 5 notes heard or of strongest strength in the harmonic series. And anyone who's a musician will recognize that as a major chord. Okay, so I'm going to hold this E, let the string vibrate freely, and press down and see how loud we can hear this. You're hearing it. You're hearing the G before you hear the E. So once up here, it's much more difficult because it wants to hit the harmonics in between. Because those are, you know, the ones that are heard first. There's an order to which the harmonics are heard. So it doesn't surprise me that you can't hear that. So fundamental, which is partial 1, partial 2 an octave higher, partial 3 a perfect fifth, which is 5 notes, and it's perfect. I'm not going to go into the geeky music stuff on that. Then a perfect fourth higher, which is the C. So you've got C, C, G, C. Then a major third higher. And then a minor third higher. So you still got all the notes to your major triad, and then the higher you go, the closer the intervals become until infinity. The interesting thing is at the beginning of creation, when the sound first came out, it was a note. Now Whittle clearly describes it morphing into the minor third first, which is the 6th harmonic. Then from that minor third, it morphs into a major third, which is the 5th harmonic. So the harmonic series at the beginning don't seem to match our natural laws. To me, rather than throwing that out and saying, well, that's just dumb, I set it on a shelf and thought, okay, this has to mean something. I don't know what it means, but it means something. Then, so you're hearing, really what I'm discovering is that the major and the minor third, they build up our chords. Here's a C major chord with a major third. If I lower that third, it becomes minor. Minor chord, major chord. And I think I say this in the second article, minor and major are like the yin and the yang. It's two opposites that do something interesting. Now, I pulled out Mozart's Marriage of Figaro theme because it starts with a chord, and I'm going to play just a tiny bit of it. And I haven't practiced this. I'm practically sight reading. So that you can hear it in major, and if I were to change it to minor, it completely changes the flavor of the song. You're going to hear the exact polar opposite. So here it is in major. And I'm just going to play that first phrase. Now, if I put it in minor, just have to remember I have to play D flat. Okay. I'm transposing in my head. If I'm going to play it in minor, this is what it's going to sound like. Oops, sorry. I can't do it. Because the 5 is major. Let me try that again. I have to remember, I have to get my music theory brain working here. Let's try it again. That sounds very different. It gives it an extremely different flavor. Now hear it again in major. Now, when you're hearing it, you're like, I changed one note. I took the major third, I brought it a half step down to make it a minor third, and I played it. It gives you very different characters. So in a way, they are polar opposites. But all of our music, including Eastern music, is based on these first 5 harmonics. I'm in the key of B flat, so we'll do it. Okay? So, which is the major chord. You don't even start getting that minor third, in this case it would be a D flat, until you're way up at the top end of the harmonics. So that is key in understanding that the sound at the beginning of time was using the upper end of the harmonics, which doesn't seem normal. So there has to be an explanation for it, which I will go to in part 2 of the frequency of creation. But all of this research that I've done, I don't know, since 2010, I think is when I started doing all this, there's a few parameters that I learned that I had to put on myself, and it was because of making mistakes. And hopefully this will help you as well. Number 1, look for patterns. When you find a pattern, even if you don't understand it, keep track of it. You can figure it out later. You don't have to know the answer all at the same time. 2, there's patterns connecting with other puzzle pieces, which everything I'm talking about, the frequency of creation, everything connects. And I'm like, is that a coincidence? Maybe not. Maybe. We'll see. I'll let you be the judge of that. So what I said before is I set the information on a shelf and let it sit there until all these puzzle pieces, it's like you take a big puzzle, you throw it on the table, and then you start putting all the pieces together. That's what any research project is like. And I learned that working on my dissertation. It's a no-brainer. You take all these pieces and you have to create a puzzle out of it, but you can't force it. It has to organically occur. 3, the musical intervals are very important. As you saw, or heard in this case, there's my major triad. Now all of a sudden I'm going to change the flavor to minor. And there's a science out there that talks about how musical intervals affect the psyche. Rhythms are the same way. You go into a grocery store and you'll notice all of the music is the same tempo. You walk into a mall. The teeny bopper places have really upbeat music. You walk into, a big department store, and in the kitchen section, they might have different music than they've got in another section. They put music on to help facilitate your buying experience to the point where you're going to want to hang out and spend more time in the store. And there's a science to this. And so in looking at that, I understand that musical intervals are important. 4, look at how the numbers are connected. So we learn the language of numbers. Computers, everything in data entry, I think they're saying is based on zeros and ones. And if you learn the language of numbers, they speak. You just have to learn the language. And there's a lot involved. I bet you can read all that stuff on the blog post. 5, understanding that frequencies will fluctuate. We get stuck in a box. Oh, here's the A440 concert pitch. These are the only frequencies that it can be. Look at the Schumann resonances. They say that they fluctuate anywhere between 17.8 hertz up to 16 hertz. They're constantly fluctuating. As a clarinetist, when I'm playing in various ensembles, I will have to make adjustments depending on the warmth of the room, depending on the humidity. I went to a competition in France. They emailed me, said, well, that was back before email, got a letter, snail mail. Oh, the pianos are going to be tuned to A442. Make sure that you're prepared to play sharp. You know, we learn to adjust. The only instruments that can't adjust are pianos and fretted instruments. Everything else can adjust. So hold the concert pinches and specific frequencies loosely. When you do that, we don't put ourselves into a box. Number 6, singers automatically will adjust because they're not having to press keys on an instrument or do something on a piano. So they can do it just by hearing, and pitches will change depending on where it is in the chord. If you understand that, when you look at a specific frequency, you hold it loosely. Where is that frequency in the harmonic series? Where is it in the chord of what I'm playing? Where is it in relation to the fundamental frequency or the key that I am playing in? That same note will change frequency positions if it's in another key. So all of that stuff matters, but we forget that. And I have to remind myself, even as a musician, how important that is. Now, the last, 7th one, not all that you read on internet land is true. And I go into some great detail on this. When it comes to working with musical frequencies and the properties of musical notes, music theory, all of that yummy stuff, if someone does not read sheet music, chances are the information that they are providing has holes. They understand certain pieces, but the bigger pieces probably not. Well, how do you know if somebody reads music or if a researcher actually understands the inner workings of music theory? Read their bios. If they don't indicate some training in music, formal training like taking freshman theory, freshman ear straining, all of those classes that us music majors dearly loved, then chances are that there's only a partial understanding, and out of partial understanding can come interesting results. So I just present that, and I've had to look at the same thing because I took a bunch of things at face value because about 25 people were saying the same thing on internet land, and then I started looking at my music theory and like, excuse me, doesn't match natural laws. Anyway, I'll leave that subject. And the last one, never assume anything. That's number 8. When we assume, it puts us in a place where we're going to get it wrong. Example, when I discovered the frequencies of the Hebrew letters, I had an expectation. I assumed that each letter was going to make a cute little song and there was only one letter per note and that all of them would work well together. And when I did all of that and looked at it, it didn't work. And it sat. Literally, I would pick it up and look at it every couple of days or a couple of weeks, and I'm like, why is this not making sense? All of a sudden, it was 2 years later when I had gotten out of my paradigm box of what I thought, what I assumed, that all of a sudden it hit me. I had it sitting in front of me, the exact answer for 2 years before I saw it. Why did I not see it? Because I assumed. So I encourage anyone who is doing research, look at things that you don't believe. Look at things that don't make sense to you. Look at things that are completely on the opposite end of the spectrum. Find the truth in that and see how it lines up with what you're doing. And chances are you're going to find the truth a lot easier. So those are the parameters I've set for myself as I have continued to go about this research. So that is the end of this video. We'll see you in video number 2 of Frequencies of Creation Part 2.